This time on Ask Radrat, we talk about whether you can ollie higher on a board that's more worn out. Maybe. Welcome back to Radrat Video, a channel about skateboarding in all of its forms. I like to answer your questions about skateboarding that were all submitted through radratvideo.com. I review skateboarding media, and I do all kinds of other stuff. The first question for today is from Keegan, who asks, out of all the video game challenge runs you've done so far, what was the hardest? Also, what was the hardest individual challenge? Big ups from New Zealand. All right, I think Pro Skater 4 Zero Stats was the hardest. That was the one where I left behind the most things that I just couldn't do. I was able to beat the game and unlock all the levels and that type of thing, but there were some that just could not be done. So that one is the hardest by definition, because it just seemed less... I don't know if they ever designed for no stats, but as the game got more open and more like designing your own character and stuff, I feel like they planned a little bit more in case you were a little bit slower or a little bit faster. Like, I'm not sure, but I think the game's got a little bit easier too. But 4 definitely had the most impossible stuff. But the hardest challenge I could think of that I actually beat was in Russia in Thug 1. There is a challenge where you are collecting ingredients for a hangover cure. And you got to grind up this building, and you jump over this gap, and you go around this corner and gap into this building. I can think of the whole line. I know exactly how it goes. And it's really hard because there's some very tight ollies where my stats are just good enough to clear it if I do it just right. If I time it perfectly, I can make it. So I go through this whole difficult thing. I get over here. I transfer up onto this building, come back around. And I'm supposed to transfer from this building back to this one over here. And it's impossible. It cannot be done with the standard stats. Like, I couldn't even tell what I was supposed to do. I was so far off from it. And I did a lot of experimentation and tried to figure out different ways to get to it. Is there anything I can climb? Is there anything that would angle me toward it? Like, there's a cannon in the level. Sometimes you grind on those and they shoot you forward. Is there any way to get up there? And the only way I could think to do it was by doing glitches. So I had to learn how to like cheat at the game, and you could start really close. There's a really narrow ledge right there. Like, you can ollie, hit the wall, and then like pop the board into your hand, put it back, and land back on the wall, and then that would like launch you up to the top. Really weird, really specific, and really hard. But the hardest part, or the worst part, was that it was so late. That was like almost the last thing you had to do. So you had to go through all this really hard stuff to get an attempt at this crazy glitch. The glitch wasn't that hard. I got used to it. I ended up having to do it late. No, it was in the next game. I had to bring it back and do that glitch again. But to learn a glitch and do it at the end of a very hard challenge, that was ridiculous. That one... Whew, I felt good after I finished that one. So that one was probably the craziest. All right, next question is from Kieran, who says, I used to skate a bit when I was younger, but was never super into it. But since discovering your channel, you've reinvigorated my interest in it. So I'm getting used to the terms and have little practical experience of switch versus fakie. In your opinion, what's more difficult, learning a trick in switch or fakie? What's more impressive for pros to land in competition? Love the content, man. Hope you're doing okay. That is a more complicated question than you might think. So fakie is a lot easier to learn because it's the same trick you were doing with the same feet doing the same jobs, but you're just going the opposite way. So if you can kick flip, learning a fakie flip does not take that long. To learn a switch flip is a lot harder. But as you get much better and you start doing things at speed and start doing gaps, doing anything fakie on a gap is really hard. Switch is probably easier. Fakie becomes, I think, the hardest stance when you are at a higher level and you're doing more like spots and you're trying to gap over stuff and do all that. Because off the nose, you're at least going forward. You're going your comfortable direction. So off the tail, easiest. Doing something in nollie, usually not that bad. Switch, you at least are on the tail. Fakie is backwards, and fakie seems like it gets to be harder. At the pro level, you very rarely see fakie. You see a fakie 360 flip from time to time. that's about it. You don't see much else fakie. So which is harder? I'm not sure how to answer that. You'll find it a lot easier at first to learn fakie tricks, definitely. After that, I'm not sure. So you'll have to see for yourself. Okay, next question is from Fernando, who says, recently on Ask Radrat, you explained the difference between front foot impossibles and 360 hospital flips. I will just show you because he describes them all. All right, so I was talking about how for a front foot impossible, you do kind of a heel flip, just a little bit, and then the board spins 360 front side. 360 hospital flip, board spins a little bit, flips a little bit like a kick flip, then backside 360. And it's possible to do an unpossible, which starts to flip like a heel flip, but you move your front foot back, and then you do like backside spin. And his question was, what if you did the opposite of that? What if you started a kick flip, moved your front foot back, and did like a front side unpossible? I have never seen that, but I think you're right that that is doable. Like there's no reason why that couldn't be done. You know, like you don't do a little bit of a kick flip. Like you could pressure, you know, put a little bit of pressure, like a little bit of a pressure hard flip. Then as it starts to go, bring your front foot back and pull it around. Definitely doable. I feel like I've seen a half before. I've seen a lot of weird things because that one looks like, you know, when you bring your front foot back and then pull it forward, almost looks like you're tripping in the air and recovering at the last second. That sounds very familiar. Like I've definitely seen, maybe I haven't. I might not have seen that one before. That one might be new. So if anyone wants to be the first to do a front side unpossible, go ahead and give it a try, and thank Fernando for the idea. All right, next question is from Swagman, who says, I always hate when non-skaters ask what my best trick is because I never know what to tell them. Most of the time I just pick a hard flat ground trick I can do and that they probably know. Do you feel the same way? And what's your best trick? LOL. Well, Swagman, if you want to have some swag, you better have a good answer to that. I would always say a kickflip 5-0 because that was probably the hardest thing I was reasonably consistent at. Like if you said, okay, well, let's see one, I could probably get really close to it. I would either do the kickflip, maybe land right next to the coping, or I could get into the 5-0 and then end up losing my balance, or I might actually land it. So like I was consistent enough that I could say that that was my best trick. So I think that's often how I would go with that. But yeah, that is an annoying trick. Someone comes up to you at the skate park, usually a kid might ask you something like that. It's tough to answer. Like, what do you consider hard? I don't know. I have a really hard time with hard flips, but considering some of the other stuff, like if I do an impossible, you might think that's harder, but I might think the hard flip is harder. It's not really a useful discussion to have. No one really benefits from it. Okay, the last question is from Jumbo Jim. How does board wear affect how high you ollie? For example, if your board has been worn in on the tail due to the slightly sharper angle of the tail, would you pop an ollie higher versus a new version of the same board? My hypothesis around this is that because of the wear on the tail, the board is at a higher angle when it hits the ground, causing for perhaps a slightly higher ollie. Okay, would having a smaller tail cause the same effect? Well, I don't think that your hypothesis holds a lot of water because hitting the ground really steep doesn't cause it to bounce higher. Like that's what's happening. You bounce the tail off the ground and it bounces up in the air and then you control it and then it becomes an ollie. So being able to hit the ground really hard with a lot of speed, that's where pop comes from. So the angle of the tails and how long they are and all that stuff has been very carefully determined by pros. Not just pro skaters who test it, but pro skateboard designers who have come up with this. And that's why the nose is a little bit bigger, because the angle of a nollie should be a little bit different. There are reasons why the board is exactly the way it is. And a board is not designed to get better as it ages. If so, you would see pro skaters with worn boards. Or you could put pads on your trucks. There's different kinds, like the shock absorbers or something like that. That would increase the pop angle. And higher trucks and different sorts of things like that you could experiment with to really see what works better for you. But in general, it's going to work best the way it was designed, because it's, you know, it's about like where it's also about timing. So you're jumping, and as you jump, you're bouncing the board off the ground. Well, if you have to wait too long and you're about to leave the ground and the tail still hasn't touched the ground yet, that's not going to help. So I get why you've come up with this concept, but I don't think that it would actually help. If you want to try using the nose versus the tail, I'm sure you could put it down on the ground and see what the angle is, and turn it around, see if the angle is any different, and try to play with that. But if anything, the difference would be very, very small. So I would trust the people who have very carefully designed your board to make sure that it makes the most sense. That was a big thing when I was first starting around 2002, 3, 4, was boards that have pop. You know, they would always brag about how much pop they have, and no one talks about that now because that was more of a marketing thing. You know, so pop comes from your legs. That's what the response was at the time. But yeah, I would just work with the board you've got. Work on your ollie technique. That's what's going to help you more than very carefully dialing in your board. So that's it for now. If you have questions, go to radratvideo.com and submit them there on the homepage. You can also submit them through Patreon if you sponsor me there. You can hit the join button here on YouTube if you want to support the channel, and I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.